Welcome everybody, good evening. First I'd like to thank Magen Yeshiva for hosting this event, as well as always, partnering with the Safe Foundation to be able to provide many opportunities in our community. We look forward to continuing that relationship as we have more programs and classes and events in the future. Tonight's evening of parenting awareness and education immediately brought to my mind a short story that happened to me as a parent when my little daughter, Sarah, was 3 years old. I came home one day from work. I was not working for Safe at the time, and I was very frustrated, as sometimes may occur to some of us. And I don't remember the exact issue, but as soon as I got in the door and I started talking to my wife about what was happening, my little Sarah was listening in, and she was all excited to hear what her Abba was going to share with that day. And she was first learning all these wonderful words of the English language. And in the course of events, I said to my wife, very loud and clear, I said, "Oh, that was so dumb." And immediately the first thing she said, the first word from all the words that I had said that evening, that she picked up on was dumb. And she jumps up, picks up her ears and her mouth and says, "Dumb." And I look at her and I say, as that moment when you just realize that as a parent you've just taught your daughter another wonderful word to add to her vocabulary, and my heart sinks a little bit and I say, "No, Sarah, don't say that word. That's not a good word. That's not such a nice word." And immediately her reaction was, "Dumb, dumb, dumb." And she runs out of the room. I try to chase her down, of course. There's no way we're going to have the conversation about it at this point. And I'm just standing there helpless, once again, thinking, what can I do? Where am I? And there's always these moments in our lives as parents that we stand and we have these opportunities, whether they're 3 years old, whether they're 13 years old, or God willing at one point 33 years old, and we end up going through life trying to maneuver through the trials and tribulations of being a parent. Tonight, we are fortunate to have two experts with us in the field of parenting and relationships. It's interesting to note that many of us spend many years in school learning so many different things, so many different topics, and becoming educated human beings. And we spend countless hours of training, of classes, learning and learning and learning from so many different people. But when it comes to what may be the most precious or most important part of our lives, we often are thrown into the throes of parenting without even thinking, without any training, without anyone introducing us, telling us anything what to do. And all of a sudden it comes, just shoot from the hip. You got to kind of figure it out on your own. So personally, I'm looking forward to this evening, and I'm hoping that we're going to pick up a lot of wonderful things this evening from our two speakers. Just structurally, we're going to have the two speeches, and everyone will have an opportunity at the end, after both David and Slavi get to speak to us. We're going to have a chance for question and answers, so if you can just make a note of something that you thought of or you would like to bring up at the end, you definitely have an opportunity to do that as well. Our first speaker tonight is David Cohn, who has been with SAFE for many years, more recently as the clinical supervisor of SAFE for a while already. David comes with a slew of experience, both as a therapist, as a parent, and as someone with many, many years of experience in the field. Currently the director of DK Counseling and the clinical director of the Safe Foundation. I'd like to call up David just to say a few words.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. So in the course of working for SAFE, I've worn many hats. I've worn the hat of teacher for the Project SAFE program that's in the schools. I've worn the hat of directing the program, helping to develop and to write the curriculum for Project SAFE, as well as being a therapist at the SAFE addiction treatment program, directing the program, and currently just supervising. So it's a real pleasure to be here and to speak with parents. One of the analogies that we've helped develop when we created the Project SAFE prevention program is the analogy of a town that has a cliff. And people are driving through the town, and one by one, as they're going through, they drive right over the cliff. and that it's a pretty steep cliff. And you can imagine that by the time they hit the bottom, pretty horrendous things happen. So the people of the town get together, and they have hospitals and doctors down on the bottom to treat and to deal with the accidents that are happening. And then one day somebody gets the very bright idea, why should we wait till they hit all the way at the bottom and the injuries are that much more horrific? Let's have the intervention happen about halfway down the cliff, and we'll intervene then. And so they do that. And then one day somebody gets the even brighter idea, why should we even have anybody driving off the cliff? Let's figure out, as they're driving towards that cliff, how we could prevent them from doing that. And so they set up signs, and they set up fences and guardrails and all that, and there's no more accidents. Nobody's falling off the cliff. So investing time and money and energy in prevention is much, much more effective than intervention, than having to deal with the things that happen once we drive over the cliff. So being able to spend as much time as I have in Project Safe, both in teaching and running it and in developing it, I have a very special place in my heart for these kind of talks, and being able to just come at this not from problems that are coming into Safe or into my office that we need to treat, but to approach things proactively and preventively, and being able to really help raise and develop our children in a healthy way. In today's times, we have many, many challenges as parents, perhaps in many ways more than ever before. We have the level of our personal stress and how intensely we work, crazy amounts of stress. We have the early and persistent exposure that our children have to toxic and unhealthy messages in pop culture and media, and they're exposed at earlier ages than ever before. We're challenged with how do we provide safe and healthy environments for our children to play, to celebrate life, to be children. We're challenged with how do we have them have healthy summers where they can have parties that are healthy and functional and not disasters. We try to juggle the needs for our children, their academic demands, as well as their time for leisure and recreation. We have the challenge of today's technology, which is developing at such a quick pace that the best we can hope to do is try to catch up with our children's knowledge and awareness of technology. Certainly not ahead of them. So what can we do? How can we really sort of stay ahead of the curve? How can we be there as parents for our kids? And instead of playing catch up or trying to fix and repair problems, how can we really be there in the role of developing them and helping raise them in the way that we all want to? So my focus tonight is going to be not focusing on any specific one problem, but really trying to give an outline, a nice way of understanding what are the ingredients, right? If you want to make a cake, what are the ingredients that you need? How much do you need of each ingredient? What order do you need to put together those ingredients? And then you're going to have the cake that you want. If you change those ingredients or you miss some ingredients, you're not going to get the outcome that you want. So I'd like to present one way of understanding how we can have healthy family. There's this amazing program called the Search Institute, and we actually used their research tremendously when we were developing the Project Safe curriculum. And they developed a number of years ago this idea called the 40 developmental assets. And they came up with a list of 40 things, and they came up with different age ranges, 0 to 3, 4 to 12, 4 to 8, 9 to 12, 13 through adolescence through 18. What are the list of 40 ingredients that kids need at each of those ages to be able to grow up healthy? And they did great research that found that the more of these assets that children have, the inverse, the less likely it is for acting out behaviors. Dropping out of school, having behavioral issues, drug and alcohol use, promiscuity, all these kind of at-risk behaviors that we're concerned about. The more assets children have, the less likely it is for them to engage in any of these acting out behaviors. And more recently, within the last year or two, the Search Institute took this to another level, and they said, what are the ingredients that families need to have a healthy family? So they came up with another list, and that's what I'd like to focus on tonight. I'd like to share with you a great quote. I'm not sure who said this. Try to see your child as a seed that came in a packet with no label. Your job is to provide the right environment and nutrients and to pull the weeds. You cannot decide what kind of flower you're going to get or in which season it's going to bloom. And really that captures, for me, the essence of what it means to really have a healthy parenting attitude. Is it has clarity on what we're responsible for. We're not responsible so much for the outcome. How are our kids going to wind up eventually as adults, as much as the process? How are we as parents through the process of them growing up? How are we there for them? How are we not there for them? So they divide, when the Research Institute divides the 40 developmental assets, they break them down into two categories. They have the external assets and the internal assets. So an example of an external asset would be a community, the school environment. Those are the things outside of the child, or the family environment. The internal assets are going to be the things that are inside the child, that the child needs to have inside themselves to develop healthily. Healthy self-esteem, healthy communication skills, other interpersonal skills, other personal skills, all those kind of things that we need as people. So let's go through some of the things that we need for healthy families. The reason why they did this is because the research showed that a healthy family serves as a real protective factor, as a shield, almost, for the exposure that children have to all the unhealthiness that they're exposed to, all the temptations of getting involved in unhealthiness that they're exposed to, peer pressure or peer influence that children might be exposed to. A healthy family creates a protective and invisible barrier around the child and enables the child to really successfully navigate through all those experiences. So what are family assets, right? We talked about the 40 developmental assets that individual children can have. What are the family assets? So family assets are basically the everyday things that families can do to be strong, even in challenging times, and they're the actions that we take to build healthy relationships and healthy family members. Okay, so the first thing that we have to understand, which is sort of obvious, but it's important to make it explicit, is we're a family, and this family is an entity. Like the government is an entity, the school administration is an entity. The family is an entity. It has a father, it has a mother, it has you guys, the children in it. We're family. And talking about the concept of family makes it real. Talking about what does it mean to be in this family? What's it like for us to have this family that we're a part of? Reinforces the message that they belong to something, even though this is obvious. Creating a message that's explicit really helps create this shield. So the first factor that they identified is the idea of nurturing relationships. Families are stronger when family members have healthy relationships with one another. People in healthy relationships communicate more openly, they show affection, physical and emotional, and they support each other. They're there for each other, they have each other's back. So what are some of the practical things that go into this? So as I go through some of the ingredients, I'm going to share some practical ideas or tips or suggestions. So here's one. We can show family members that you care about each other in little ways, right? Finding small, new ways, but that are visible and obvious to show other people in the family that you care. Leaving a note on the bathroom mirror for a spouse. Leaving a note in the lunch for the child. Just cute little nothing. Doesn't take much time, doesn't take much effort, but it reinforces the message that the family member is cared for. Keeping the focus on the relationship is another one. Sometimes family members do things that we don't like, or that stress us out, or that make us unhappy. And we have to confront the problem, we have to deal with the problem. And during that time, we get stressed, we get upset, we get frustrated, we get anxious, we get worked up. Our buttons might be getting pressed as parents, not might be, they will be, sooner or later, one way or another. And so in those times that are stressful and that we're dealing with problems, it becomes even more important to keep the focus on the relationship itself. What often goes out the window during the time when the relationship is needed to make the successful parent-child interaction is the relationship itself. It becomes an authority, it becomes a power and control, it becomes a lecture. And the message needs to be given, and the discipline needs to be given, and the reinforcement, positive or negative, needs to be given. But the emphasis in the moment that this is a relationship that we have, a connection that we have with each other, needs to continue to be made very explicit. Making it a priority to maintain the relationship between one family member and another, even in the midst of challenges. Here's another one, talking about everyday stuff every single day. Not waiting for important conversations or important issues to come up in order to sit down and have a talk, but making a habit in the family that we talk on a regular basis, and it may be talking about important things, and it may be talking about silly things and not important things. Spouse to spouse, parent to child. One of the coolest things, my oldest is a 12-year-old. Every single day when I come home, he turns to me and he goes, "How was your day?" And every single day when he does that, it blows my mind. It's like the coolest thing. He's asking me, how was my day? And I think that comes only from the fact that I've put the effort, together with my wife, in instilling that kind of environment that's a question that should be asked. And it's not just, hi, how are you? Fine. And it's just a nicety. It's a serious question. There's an answer to be given. I have to stop. I have to think about it. Think about what do I want to share with my son about my day. And then I want him to do the same. I want to hear about his day. So taking the time to do those things. Asking other family members about the things that they really enjoy. What are their hobbies? What are their enjoyable activities? I once got a blessing from someone. He said to me, your children should always feel like you spend more time with them than you actually do. I'm a pretty busy person, and I think we all are. And in today's time, if we want to be realistic about it, we really do need to focus when we think about the time that we spend with family members on quality versus quantity. We don't really have a lot of quantity. We have very, very limited time to give to each other as people. Maybe less than ever before as a family. But if we could, instead of trying to find more time for quantity, instead focus on how to make the quality that much more significant and to raise the level of the quality of the time, then maybe the quantity isn't as important because the time that we do have is really meaningful and relevant. So here's another asset that they've identified as an important family asset, and it's called establishing routines. We know from research that families are stronger when they share meals, when they share traditions and activities together, when family members know that they could depend on each other. So one thing that's very huge in the prevention field of research is family meals. And we have the Shabbat meals, but weekday meals as well. If there could be at least one meal during the week, at least one meal during a given day that a family could sit and eat together. The more meals per week that a family eats together as a family, the research shows how preventative that is for all the acting out behaviors that children grow up and engage in. It's amazing. Just the idea of the family sitting together and having a meal. Obviously, if that time is disaster time and it's stressful and it's negative and it's punitive, that's not a quality experience. But if the family time is a time to just be together, without the time for lectures and without the time for fixing and repairing and addressing grades and anything like that, just to be together. And that's very significant. Another idea that goes into the family asset of establishing routines is planning regular family fun nights. Having family meeting night, where the family gets to get together and hear out how are things going in this family? How's everybody's experience? I know from personal experience, these moments where the family gets together for the fun night or for the family meeting become the highlight. The kids keep track of it. They're on top of it. They know what the agenda is. They remember what the agenda was last time, and they look forward to it. Another idea is parent-child quality time. I only have boys, so it becomes, and I'm the one who spends significantly less time with my kids than my wife. I have a rotation. I take the kids out for breakfast once a week, and they have a rotation. I never need to keep track who's who. They're on top of it. They remember who went last week and whose turn it is this week, and they know what they were going, and they're on top of it. And that time is they know. No matter what's going on and no matter what issues need to get addressed, that's not going to be the time for it. That's the time for them to talk about whatever they want to talk about, silliness, nothing, shoot the breeze, whatever it may be. Be intentional about maintaining meaningful traditions in the family. Anniversaries, birthdays, milestones, good grades. Making a big thing out of those things is very, very important. Letting other people know in the family that they can count on you, right? Keeping track of things that are taking place in the family. Remembering when something important is going on. There's something going on in school for one of the kids. There's something going on in your spouse's job that's important meeting. There's something significant going on at home. Something significant, there's a doctor checkup of some sort, and inquiring about it, following up on it. These are all such obvious things, and I'm sure we do them on some level. I think the most important piece to really recognize is that these small and obvious things, when we do them with an intention, with a very explicit intention, I'm doing this to create a healthier family, to create a family, the real sense of family, and that's talked about. That's really what takes it to another level. Today, with today's smartphones and apps, this is an easy one. Creating a family calendar that's shared. You know, in the old days it would be hung on the fridge or somewhere in the kitchen. Now everyone could have it on their phone. And everyone in the family has access to it, and everyone could see what's going on for everyone else in the family. And so there's a sense of connection, and there's a sense of everybody's in on what's going on in the family. Another family asset is called maintaining expectations. And families are stronger, we know this again from the research, when we have clear expectations for each other, including talking about tough issues, setting fair rules and boundaries, and expecting everybody to contribute to family life. So one of the strategies that parents can do is using popular culture, using the news, current events, to bring up tough topics. Using the news and things that kids are hearing about in the world is an excellent segue to get into important conversations, life-related, something that's going on locally in the news or nationally, to help get the conversation started. Another one, and this is again so evident when we stop to think about it, so obvious, but if we could be proactive about thinking through tough conversations, what happens very often, maybe amidst all the hustle and bustle and stress of everyday life, is we wind up having tough conversations with our kids without really proactively planning for having the conversation. And so what happens is we're our own natural self in the moment. Our kids are acting like their own natural, spontaneous self, and then for better or for worse, it flies. And sometimes it's for better, sometimes it's for worse. But if we stop and we ask ourselves in advance, what kind of questions do I need to ask right now to the kid? What questions is the other person going to want from me in this conversation? What can I do to make this conversation go well? When would be a good time that everybody who's involved would be able to focus on having a productive experience in this conversation? And just asking those questions, and setting up the timing, the context, the place, and the focus sets the odds for that conversation to be that much more productive and effective. Be proactive in setting expectations together, and this one is developmental. The older the children are, the more we should expect to involve them and to collaborate with them. The older they get, the more collaboratively we want to raise them. We want to include them in the expectations, whether we're talking about the grades that we expect them to have in school, behaviors that we expect them to have at home or in school, attitudes and values that we want them to have. Instead of speaking at them, to them, imposing on them, lecturing and preaching, collaborating together with them. What do you think about this? And how do you think this would be handled? Even in discipline, the older a kid gets, the more effective the discipline is when it's done collaboratively. You know, something's going to have to be done. You know that we're going to have to address that. How do you think would be a fair way to address that? Obviously, we can't do that with a 7-year-old, but we could do that with adolescents. Then there are the 4 C's. And these are very helpful to remember as well. When we're talking about establishing expectations for the family, remember these 4 C's. Clear, consistent, completion, and compassionate. Right? So clear means make the expectations that we have for each other and for the family members very explicit, very concrete, very understandable. Reinforce them by writing them down. Right? In my house we have, we don't have it anymore now, but at one point in the kids' lives we had family rules. And we were struggling with some of those rules. Some of the kids in the house were really struggling with that. So we put it down. It came out of a family meeting, or several of them, and we had it written down. The kids helped write some of them and decorate it, and that was helpful. It was a concrete, explicit reminder for them of the expectations that were set. Discussing some of the whys. So one of the worst things that we could do as parents is simply say, because I told you so. And we do that a lot of times out of stress, or impatience, or maybe because of our own confusion or lack of clarity about what we're wanting from the kids. The older the kids get, the more they do deserve an intelligent, respectful response about why this is important for us, why we're asking this of them. Then there's the consistent, being fair in how expectations are set, how they're monitored, and how they're enforced. So for example, if teens are not allowed to text during meals, then the parents shouldn't be allowed to text during the meal either. The next C is completion. Focusing on the goal more than the process and determining whether the expectation is met. So for example, if one of the children is told that he needs to clean the room, how he cleans the room is less important than the fact that the room got cleaned. And sometimes we wind up getting focused on the process because we have a specific way that we want it to be done, and we may be right about it. But when we have an expectation, if we could keep the focus on the expectation getting met rather than how it gets met, then we're more likely to have less struggle on it. And then finally, the last C is compassionate, remembering to keep the relationship a high priority and recognizing that nobody's perfect. Anyway, there are several others that focus on community, but I just wanted to take the time to focus on the ones that are specifically about family. And, yeah, you coming up? Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, David. I'm going to sign up for one of those breakfasts, definitely, when I get a chance. If you can put me on that rotation. Much appreciated. Our next speaker presenter is a favorite that has been here a few times already, and is once again welcome back with open arms. Slava Young Writes Wolf, the author of the Raising a Child with a Soul, parenting and relationship instructor for many years as well. If you could please give us a little bit of your time as well.
Yes. Thank you so much for inviting me here tonight, and it is a pleasure to be back with you. I was at a class that I was giving to couples, and at the end of the class, it was very late in the evening. I was ready to go. My coat was already on, and a very wonderful couple came over to me and said, "We have just one more question, please, just one more question." 10:30 at night, I was really ready to leave, but one more question. "So what is it?" I said. "What do you do with a child who refuses to go to sleep at night?" And I look at them and I said, "You put him to sleep. You say that's it. How old is this child?" 6. 6 years old. "So what happens?" I said. And they said, "He just refuses to go to bed. He comes out, he goes in, he comes out, he goes in. Middle of the night, he gets up and he wants to watch a video." "A video?" I said. "So what do you do?" "Well, we put on a video. He likes a little hot cocoa." I said, "You're kidding me. What about just the word no?" And they look at each other, and this young mother says to her husband, "Show her." He pulls up his sleeve, and I see on his arm red, long lines. And I say, "What is that?" And he says, "This is what happens when I say no." He scratches us. "How old are you?" I said. He tells me he's 30. And I say to this lovely woman, "And how old are you?" And she says, 28. "So you're 58 years together, cannot put a 6-year-old to sleep. How is that possible? How is it possible that wherever I go, I meet parents who tell me that their home is filled with chutzpah, with disrespect, with pain, with frustration from children who refuse to listen? And it does not matter if your child is 6 or 10 or 16. Unfortunately, we have today homes that are out of control. Children who are filled with the most incredible chutzpah, arrogance, entitlement. That's what you bought me? Whatever. That's where we're going? Nothing's good enough. And outright not listening. Disrespect. And when one child has this attitude, let's not kid ourselves, the other children in the home pick it up. And all of a sudden you are faced with a table filled with children who do not listen, who do not have kavod, who do not have honor, who are in your face texting, not looking at you when you speak to them, totally disregarding any rule that you have. And then the shalom bayit, the peace in the home between husband and wife, is affected too, because there's a terrible pain in the heart, and the joy of parenting is gone, and nobody wants to be there. Not a father, not a mother, not the children. So, is this something that we can fix? Of course we can fix. Every home needs to have effective discipline. And just as a car needs brakes that work, or else the car will be out of control, when a home is out of control, we need to have effective discipline. And if you say to me, "But I do it, I bribe, I make my star charts, I punish, I scream, I yell, I've done it all, and it still doesn't help," then I will tell you that sometimes we have the best ideas in the world, but we are not effective in our discipline. We make mistakes. And so tonight, I'd like us to explore in the next moments that we have 6 tips for effective discipline, that we can come home and really change our homes, our relationships with our children, our parenting, and our lives, and bring the simcha, bring the joy back into our homes. So where do we begin? Number one, the most effective rule for discipline is that we cannot lose control. Do you know what discipline is? Discipline is my way as a parent of teaching my child self-control. You want to hit? You cannot hit. You want to push your sister? You cannot. You want to scream at your father? You can't. You want to shut the door on your mother? You can't. You don't want to do your homework now? Too bad. You have to learn self-control. But how will I teach you self-control if I'm screaming, if I'm yelling, and if I myself am out of control? A father called me the other day, and he said he came home, and his daughter had the most terrible chutzpah, opened a mouth like you can't imagine. And he said to her, "This is how you speak to me? This is how you treat a father? That's it." And he goes into his room, he slams the door. And she felt badly. And he told me that afterwards, she knocked on the door and said, "Daddy, can I bring you a Diet Coke?" And he told me, he said to her, "Get out of my face." And I said to him, "And that's how you handled it?" "So now you have two problems," I said to him. Now you have the problem of the chutzpah that you did not settle. You did not teach your child how to be respectful. And now you have another problem. Your daughter is angry at you. Think about it. When somebody screams at you, do you look at that person and say, "This is a person I really want to be close to. This is a person who speaks sense. This is a person with wisdom"? Or do you look at the person and say, "Stop. I don't want to hear this. I can't stand the way you scream at me"? When we scream at children, that's not discipline. And we destroy the bond that we have with our children. And if you say to me, "I can't help it." I was sitting with a couple once, and they say to me, "Yeah, we're screamers." But you know what? My mother was a screamer. My father was a screamer. My grandmother is a screamer. What can I do? We're screamers. And I said to this couple, "Let me ask you something. Would you say to me, my mother was a smoker, my father was a smoker, my grandmother was a smoker. I smoke. I can't stop." If you know that something hurts you, then you stop. Everyone has it in their power. To be forceful, yes. To be serious, yes. To be firm, yes. To scream, no. And when you sit in another room and scream out and say to your child, "That's not how you talk to your mother," that's not discipline. That's screaming from another room. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to change the tone in our home to a tone of respect, because we will be much more respected when we speak firmly, we know what we mean, and we do not yell. I've been in homes, I call them screaming homes. Everything is screamed. Breakfast is ready, the school bus is here, everything's screaming. Nobody listens to each other. And when a father or mother gets angry and they really start screaming, do you know what the child's thinking? There goes my father again, screaming. There's my mother, out of control again. Because you're always screaming. So your discipline is not effective. Rule number 2. Separate a child from his action. What does that mean? It means that we must stop labeling our children. No one in this room is a prophet. No one here is a Navi. But I will tell you this. Tell a child often enough you're mean, that child will grow up thinking, "I'm mean." You're bad, you're lazy, you're a baby, you're a whiner, you're a mess. What's the matter with you? That's not discipline. That's just calling names. So tell a child often enough, "You're so lazy. You never bring your work home. You never do your homework." That child will grow up thinking, "I cannot do anything. You're such a baby." That's the adult who is always complaining and whining. We all know adults like that. So we have to label the action. what you're doing is mean, but you're not mean. This isn't for you. You know, at the end of one of my classes, one of the parents said to me that she realized that she has a child who moves very slowly. Every morning it's a battle to get this child onto the bus. Every morning it's something. She's screaming. The whole house revolves around this child. But she decided after hearing this class that she would go home and she would take a new approach. And instead of focusing on the negative, she'd be positive. Come on, you could be the fastest kid in the house, I know. 5 minutes, you're gonna be down 5 minutes. One day, her little boy said to her, Mommy, can I tell you something? And she said, sure. And he said, Mommy, thank you so much. She said, for what? And he said, because you stopped calling me turtle. Every day you called me a turtle, Mommy. And you stopped. And I love you. We have to stop calling our children names because that's not discipline. Number 3, we need to be consistent. And that means that we don't give empty threats when we discipline. What does that mean? There's 3 parts to this. There's 3 types of mistakes that we make when we discipline. The first is that we make empty threats. Did you ever sit in a park and there's a child who's throwing sand? And then you hear a mother or father say, come on, you do that again, we're leaving. The child looks, stops, 10 minutes later. I said, you do that again and we are leaving. For the next hour you hear, you do that again, we're leaving. But you never leave. And the child knows that he does not have to take you seriously. I was sitting in a Beit Knesset in a shul, and there was a little boy with a whistle lollipop. And the mother says, you can have this lolly, sit nicely, but you cannot whistle. Every 2 minutes, so the mother says, give it to me. No. Are you going to stop? 5 minutes later, the whole hour sitting there in shul. Give it to me or we're leaving. Child knows, forget it. You're not effective in your discipline. Whatever you say, it doesn't matter. And then you take an older child. If you do not study and you're going to come home with a very bad mark, I'm taking your cell phone away. Sure enough, you come home with the mark, not a good mark, cell phone's not taken away. You do this again, you speak like this again, you're not going on the sleepover. That's it. Saturday night, you're not going to that sleepover. Saturday night comes, child looks at you, sure enough, sleepover. What does that mean? Empty threats. Your discipline is not effective. That's number 1. Number 2, impossible consequences. You're at a restaurant, your child's fighting, and you say, that's it. That is it. I've had it. You are never coming out with us again. That's it. Next time, you are staying home. I know a mother who said to me, she said to her kids, no TV for a year. A year, do you hear me? A year. Now what? Because you know that you're not going to keep your word. So your discipline becomes ineffective because you're saying things that you know you will never keep. So a child looks at you and thinks, so what? You say you'll take away my cell phone, you're not taking it away. No TV, I'm still going to watch TV. And the third part of that is Moody Discipline. What's Moody Discipline? It means you have certain rules. Let's say no TV before homework, no eating in the bedrooms, no jumping on the beds. You had a very good day in the office. You had a very good day with your friends. Child takes cookies upstairs. You don't say anything, you're in a good mood. Week later, you come home, you had a terrible day in the office. Market dropped. You had a terrible day. You had a fight with your sister-in-law. You're taking food upstairs? You know the rule. But a child doesn't know. Because 1 week it's yes, and 1 week it's no. 1 week you let a child sit at a table and kick his brother under the table, and the next week you go crazy about it. So is it yes or is it no? Once we have a rule, we have to stick to the rule. And it cannot go according to our moods. Number 4, we need to give clear discipline. What does that mean? It means that my child will feel safe if they know what to expect from me. And I'm clear about it. And I don't wait till after the problems occur. I anticipate. I was in Miami with one of my teenage children, and I met a grandmother. She must have been in her 80s. And she said to me, it was Shabbat morning, and she said to me, I don't know how you mothers do it today. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, my teenage grandson is staying with me. I wanted to have a heart attack last night. I thought I would just die. He did not come back to the apartment until 4 o'clock in the morning. I didn't know where he was. I wanted to kill him. How do you do it? Now, it's not her job. She's the grandmother. She's in her 80s. But if you are the parent, you do not send a child out and then wait for them to come back and get angry at the time and the hour they come back. You say, you're going out now? Okay. What time will you be back? You have your cell phone when you're going out on a Saturday night? What time are you checking in with me? And when I call you, you pick up the phone. I'm going out. I don't want to come back and hear that you had 10 friends over the house. Here's what we expect from you. Don't wait for the problems. Be clear. When you say to a younger child, be good, you know what the child's thinking? But mommy, daddy, I am good. I don't know what you mean. When really you mean to say, stop kicking your brother under the table. Clean up your room. But mommy, I did clean up my room. But then we have to be clear. Put away your clothing, put away your laundry, make your bed. Because to the child, I did it. Come home at a good hour. What does that mean? A child walks in the door 1 in the morning. Are you crazy? But it's 1 in the morning, Ma. Dad, it's early. My friends are still out. So we are not clear in what we are telling our children that we expect from them. And we can avoid so many problems if we give clear and effective discipline. Number 5, what can we do? What can we do as husbands and wives? Do you know what we can do? And this is so crucial to parenting and to discipline. We can be united. The Torah tells us about a rebellious child, and you know what it says? The ben sorer umorer. It says that the rebellious child did not listen to the voice of his father or to the voice of his mother. Why does it not just say that he did not listen to the voice of his parents? It's incredible. Our sages teach us because his father said one thing and his mother said another, and that is what caused the child to rebel. When you have a triangle in your home and there's one parent against a child and another parent, you have trouble. Parents must be united. And so when a mother says to a child, don't tell daddy, okay? Don't tell daddy, we're going to leave the bags in the car. And then when daddy leaves, we're going to bring it into the house. Don't tell daddy. Do you know what we're teaching children? Don't tell daddy. Exactly. And next time, I will not tell you, Mom. Because you have taught me very well, don't tell daddy. If there is a rule that you are not supposed to go to a movie during the week, and a father says to a child, shh, don't tell mommy, I'm going to take you to the movies. But don't tell. Again, ineffective discipline. Because you are creating a united front between a child and a parent against another parent. And then if we wonder, where is this chutzpah from? Such disrespect. How do they talk like that to me? How do they treat me like that? But I'm to blame because I'm the one who taught this child. Because when I say don't tell mommy or don't tell daddy, I'm teaching terrible chutzpah. When I argue with my husband or with my wife in front of my children about the discipline, again, I'm creating terrible disrespect. And so, when a mother says to a father in front of the child, look at this, you always make her cry. You don't know how to talk to her. You always make her cry. What does that teach a child? Chutzpah, disrespect. When a father says to a mother, this is how you discipline? Please. This is what you do? Again, chutzpah. And a child is learning from their own parents, unbelievable, from their own parents in their own home, how to disrespect their own mother and father. The greatest gift that we can give children is shalom bayit, is peace in the home, when a father and mother are on the same side. And finally, we come to number 6. Give a child, a parent, to respect. Be a role model for a child. And what does that mean? That is one of the most difficult rules, but one of the most effective rules of discipline. I want us to be honest here. Who should our children see today as role models in their lives? Sports stars? Hollywood stars? Scandals from one day to the next. They don't learn from them how to dress, how to walk, how to talk, how to be dignified. Wherever you go, there's a scandal. So who should our children look at to see how to act and dress and speak in life, if not for you and for me? We are our children's greatest role models. So how is it that the New York Times has an article that says that in the Yeshiva and in the day school movement, there are now classes for tweens and preteens and bar and bat mitzvah boys and girls? And do you know what these classes are about? How to act at a bar and bat mitzvah. And what do they teach these girls and boys in school? They have a teacher come in to teach them how to sit at a table and not throw food across the room. They have a teacher come in to teach the boys to pull up their pants so their boxers don't show, and to teach the girls to pull down their mini dresses. We have to teach that to our children in school? They teach the boys and girls that when the rabbi speaks, or the bar mitzvah boy speaks, or the parents speak, they have to be quiet, as if that is some new lesson in life, to have kavod. Girls should not be sitting in the bathroom and gossiping during the ceremony. This is all part of the article in the New York Times. This is what our children have to go to a class for? Why? Because we ourselves, painfully, have not taught our children dignity. Go to a bar mitzvah and go to a bat mitzvah and look around the room and ask yourself, what is my child seeing right now? Too many children have told me with tears that they have gone to a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, and watched their parents and their parents' friends drunk, flirting, behavior that has embarrassed them. Why? This is a painful topic, but if we want children who will be children of dignity and kavod, then it begins right here, right here. And I wrote an article called Peter Pan Parenting, which means that so many parents today do not want to grow up and do not want to grow old. And so we wear the same things and we listen to the same music, and nobody wants to be around, and everybody wants to have fun. And fun is good, and vacation is good, but our children also need role models. And so I ask you, as we leave tonight, to ask yourself, when my child sees me and thinks of me, what image comes to his mind? Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph the righteous one, alone in Egypt, the only Jew, 17 years old. How did he do it? He was about to fall, he was about to stumble, and our Chachamim teach us that in the last moment, do you know what he did? Do you know what prevented him from falling? He saw the image, the picture of his father in his mind, and he said, oh my God, of course I can't do this. Look at my father. What would my father say? And so we need to ask ourselves, what is the legacy that we leave our children? I will end with this. And I especially appreciate so much that there are so many fathers here tonight, because I know that it's difficult to get out at night. And often we say to the mothers, you go, and then tell me what they said. I'm tired. So if you took the time to be here tonight, kol hakavod to you. You are a special type of father. But at the same time, I'd like to say that being a father is more than just paying the Amex bill. You are a special role model for your child. And we live in very difficult and stressful times. So I'd like to leave you with this. A couple that I teach called me up. They were both on the phone. And they told me that the father, the husband, lost his job. And they're going through terrible financial stress. And they wanted a little chizuk, they wanted a little strength. And I told this father, get up every morning. Don't lose it with the children. Don't lose it with your wife. Put a smile on your face. Things will get better. A few months later, they call me again. Father went out. He still doesn't have a job. He went out running and jogging in the morning, fell down, broke his leg. Now he needs surgery. He's on crutches. Now he really can't find a job. Again, we go through the chizuk. And they just recently called me again. And they said, we want you to hear this. They sent their son away to college. And their son called and said, Mommy and Daddy, I want you both on the phone. I want you to hear this. First night in college, we had a fraternity meeting. And the question was, who's your hero? And some kids took it as a joke. Superman, Batman. But you know what, Mom and Dad? When it was my turn, you know what I said? I said, my hero is my father. Because he wakes up every morning, and no matter how tough life gets, he shows us love. He doesn't lose it. He's my dad. And he shows me what it is to be a man. You're my hero, Daddy. And I love you. And I'll never forget it. That's what it means to be a father. That's what it means to be a mother. To leave our children with a legacy of love, of dignity, of respect, and of kavod. I thank you so much for inviting me here tonight.
Is that when we're dealing with teenagers, with adolescents, it often comes up, the idea that friends are not always on the same page as the parents. And you're telling me as a parent that I have to do something, and yet all my friends, or some of my friends, don't have to. How do I address that? What's the way to deal with that with my teenagers?
So just to follow through on the theme of some of the thoughts that I was focusing on, and then like the question. Two thoughts. Number one, the idea of the family having its own unique identity, being its own protective barrier and shield, having an explicit understanding of what it means to be part of this particular family. And when that's cultivated and that's cultured in the family, then naturally there's an understanding. This is how we do things. This is why we do things. As opposed to, we do things and everyone should do things the same way. This is part of what it means in this family. And then the other thought is, again, following through on the theme of treating things proactively rather than reactively, that having conversations as the kids are getting older becomes more and more important about peer influence and about what it means to see other kids get things or other ways that families do things, and having that be a conversation in and of itself, where those ideas are getting explored, the children have an opportunity to hear it out, they have an opportunity to hear why the parents are holding firm to their own values or ways of doing things, so that these things are less likely to actually be an issue as they arise.
As a mother of teens myself, I understand what you're saying. And you will always find situations in life that people do things differently than you. We know that. It's important, especially with teenagers, that we not only have communication with them when there are problems, so that they trust us and feel good with us. And I find that if you have a good rapport with your kids, then when you do make the rules, and the rules are fair, and you know that you're being fair about it, and I'll give you an example for that, then they're able to accept what you have to say. So the combination is, number one, having good communication with children, not just when there are problems. Some parents only communicate when there's a problem. Wait till your father gets home. Why should it always be that fathers speak about problems and otherwise you don't have the communication? Find something good to do with every child. A few minutes a day, once a week, whatever it is, that you have that rapport. And if you do that, then your child will learn to trust you. At the same time, we have to be fair. I met a mother the other day at the end of the lecture, and she told me she has a teenage daughter who refuses to invite friends over. And I said to her, why? And she said to me, well, I have a rule. Let's see what you think about that. I don't believe that teenagers should be on their phones when they're together. They should all be friends and they should be doing things. So when they come to my house, I told my daughter they all have to give their phone in to me. I said to her, it's not going to work. So you have to know your child. You have to be fair about the rule, and you have to communicate positively. And then when there's something negative, even if your child doesn't agree with you, they will get on board because they want to have that good rapport with you. Everybody wants to be loved in life. And I also find that when a teenager especially is angry, an angry child, behind the anger there's pain. And you have to figure out where that pain is coming from. Any other questions?
Okay, two questions on the floor. The first one is directed toward two questions on the floor. First one is directed toward David. You mentioned the idea of having family meetings. So the question is, what exactly happens, and what do you do in those family meetings? After you address that, we'll bring up the next question.
Okay, so family meetings. Well, there's no right or wrong way to do this. And I would encourage anybody to take the idea and try to make it work for your family and for the needs that you perceive in the family. But family meetings is an excellent place, first of all, for the family to have family time in and of itself, just experience sitting together. And as opposed to quality family time, where there isn't an agenda, you're introducing the idea that there is a way for this family to work together constructively, a time to review how are things going, a time to address and identify problems, and to problem solve. Some of the complicated questions that could come up is, if there's an issue with one particular child, is family meetings a place to address that or not? And in general, family meetings is a place for the family agendas to be addressed. And when there's something that's really a particular personal issue, somebody's struggling in school in a personal way, somebody has a particular behavioral issue that's really more relevant for them, then that may not be the time and the place to focus on it, unless it's being addressed first, individually. But in general, the family meetings would be a place where the family together can talk about expectations, behavioral expectations, stuff that's going on for school-related stuff, academic expectations. As the children get older, as I mentioned before, it becomes a place to explore agendas for discipline, problem solving, collaborating together in a discussion about issues that are arising in the family. So it becomes a place to proactively set what's going on for the family, what are the expectations for the family, and also to problem solve reactively as things are going on. And then for the parents to come in with an agenda, but also leave time for the children to bring up their own agenda, and for them to be able to use it. And it's amazing, the kids will come to family time prepared with things that they want to bring up.
Okay, second question for both of you is the fine balance. This question actually we get a lot in SAFE as a general topic that comes up many times, so it's a great question for both of you to address. The fine balance between being a parent and being a friend, the boundaries, the idea of when, at what point how do we deal with that? Tips, advice to deal with the idea that you don't want to lose that, I believe it was, you don't want to lose that friendship that you have with a child, but to be able to still maintain the boundaries because they still have a parent.
It could be a difficult boundary, but we have different mitzvot that help us create those boundaries. And it would be a good idea for every parent to review what the mitzvot are. Meaning, every mother and father has a seat. A child doesn't just sit in your seat, so you learn awe. I've been in homes where children have just, slapped their parents on the back. You don't do that. So there's certain moments of awe that we teach our children. You don't call a parent or grandparent by their first name. You don't contradict. You don't say, that's not it, you're wrong. That's not how you speak to a parent. At the same time, being a friend means that my child feels safe with me, comfortable with me. My child feels that he or she can speak to me and confide in me. And even if they'll tell me the truth about something that I will be disappointed in, they will never lose the love that we have together. I can tell you this, I have, thank God, children of many ages. One of my best friends in life is my married daughter. When she was growing up, she had the awe. Baruch Hashem, she still has the awe. But after years of having that communication and that trust, that love, that incredible love comes through. But we have to remember that we don't go down to our children's level to try to get them to like us. Instead, we bring them up to a higher level. And we teach them derech eretz, but at the same time, laugh with your children. Have a good time with them. We forgot how to laugh already. Everything's so serious. Children come home, it's all about commands. Did you do this? Did you do that? Take a bath, do your homework. You develop the love. And when you develop that love, your discipline is much more effective because your home is filled with joy.
Just one more thought to add to that is that oftentimes what I've found is that kind of question comes from a fear that parents have that as their kids grow older, they're going to become irrelevant to their children. And their kids are not going to need them, and they're not going to want to turn to them. And that fear is actually unfounded. I mean, it's important to understand developmentally the stages that kids grow through, and that as they get into adolescence, their identity is really wrapped very much around understanding who they are and how they fit into the world, and therefore how they fit in with their peers becomes one of the most important things to them. But that's a developmental need, and it doesn't take away from the fact that you're the parent and they need their parent. So having that insecurity can really feed that as a sense of fear, as opposed to really being understanding that they always need us. And so we could be there as we need to be as parents.
Left side tonight.
So just to follow up on the last point about having fun and laughing with your kids. So it turns out, like, as an example, you mentioned you have a bunch of boys. So in my house, we have a bunch of boys, and we horse around, right? And if I'm sitting on the floor to stretch, they'll jump on top of me. Just, it's horsing around. I mean, there is the fine line, but again, if you can just elaborate on where that line can sometimes kind of be stepped over, and with specific situations like that may be in fact more physical, where would the line be with that? And then another question, I suppose, what about backtracking, right? So you tell your kid you can't watch TV for a year. How do you kind of get yourself out of that hole? What if it is, you talk about a kid that has chutzpah because he didn't like a gift. What if in fact, it was really a bad gift? Like, how do you kind of deal realistically once you found that, oh, I made a mistake?
Okay, we can just start with the first one first, and then we'll get to the second. Just about the physical boundaries. Sometimes you want to have fun, have a great time. How do you address that?
Yeah, so a family full of boys, I could totally relate to the horsing around thing. And I think personally, that's a pretty important element, especially in a sense of bonding and special time with the father. I think that it's important to make a distinction together with the kids, just in conversation, about there's this idea of horsing around where we're having a really good time, and it's meaningful, and it's connection, and it's fun, versus getting too friendly in losing that perspective of I'm the parent, and the idea of having respect for a parent. So I think that these are conversations just like we're sitting here today and having them in a very explicit way. We can have them with our children in the same explicit way, obviously in a developmentally appropriate way, using words and ideas that they can relate to and understand. But I would have a conversation about that and explore what they think about that. And if they can understand that there's a difference, when there's a moment of horsing around that's appropriate and that you're comfortable with as a father and you value, versus crossing a line in some way.
I think, and I believe, that a lot of us parent without thinking. And if we put thought into what is happening, then we can prevent a lot of problems. Horsing around is great. Rolling on the floor with your boys are great. Now watch the scene and ask yourself, where is the line drawn? Are the kids starting now to feel comfortable and slapping you on the back? Are they punching you? Are they coming over to you and giving you like a, oh dad, look at this, let's see if you could do this, punching you in the stomach? Then you know that things are not with derech eretz. Of course, they don't mean to be, but they need us to be a guide and a leader. So as a parent, let's sometimes step back and see where things are leading to. We also make the mistake to think that if a child is unhappy, I'm not a good parent. We want our children to like us. I want my children to like me, but sometimes they won't like what I have to say, and that's very different from not liking me. Do you see the difference? So if I create certain rules in a home, those rules are respected. Husband and wife respect each other. They also learn kavod from that. Derech eretz is from the way that we speak to each other, and that doesn't mean that you can't, go into a pool and swim with your kids and have a basketball game and everyone's trying to get the ball in. You could still have fun, but it's up to us to teach the children because they don't know. It's up to us to teach them ad kan, till here. And you have to know that certain lines cannot be crossed. This is your father, this is your mother. So we don't say he about a father in front of him. How often do children say that? Well, he said, she said about the mother. If we don't correct that, then children think that that's okay. And so the line of awe is brought down. So at the same time we balance the awe, the kavod, the respect, and of course the love, the good communication, having wonderful times. Find out what your children love. We make a mistake and we think that if we take them places or drop them off to activities, we're parenting. It's not parenting. If your child loves basketball, look at me. I played hockey I'm not a hockey player. My son loves hockey. I would go outside late at night, go in front of a net, and I'd be the goalie. Did I ever learn how to do that growing up? No, I've played football, I've played baseball. Why? Because my son loves it. And if he loves it, then I love it. And that's how you develop that friendship with the child. It doesn't have to be that they have to be palsy-walsy. Take your clothing, go into your wallet, take your money without asking. That's not friendship. That's entitlement.
Okay, the second question was, well, what happens to most of us is that we end up in that hole where we say, "What? You can't have TV for a year. You're never going to do this again." What do you do when that happens? Where do we go? How do we address that? How do we get out of that?
The first thing we have to do, I believe, from tonight is to realize that we have to think before we speak. And that means having control again in our homes. It's when we scream, it's when we become emotional that we say those things. If something very difficult has happened with a child, it's okay to say to that child, especially preteens and teens, it's okay to say, "You know what? I am so disappointed right now, and I am so upset right now that we're going to have to think about this, and we're going to have to discuss this later." And discuss it later, don't let it go. But you don't have to right away say, "No TV for a year." Now let's say you've done that, okay? Let's say you've done that. It's a bad mistake for parenting. I hope everyone who leaves here tonight will resolve to say that I'm not going to be giving these types of consequences anymore that are impossible to give. Because it makes me an ineffective parent. So from today on, that can't happen. We think before we speak. If you have done that in the past, okay, you've done it. If you're going to do it in the future, and I hope that you won't, I hope everyone watching this will not, but let's say you slip up. Then you spoke about family meeting before. Then you're going to have to speak to this child together as husband and wife, and you're going to have to address what was done, and you're going to have to come up with a consequence that will be effective. Don't let it go. But remember, if you keep changing these consequences, you're only hurting yourself. So think before you do it. That's really the main thing. Purposeful parenting, that's what I call it.
There's also tremendous opportunity in that moment. We don't go to school to learn how to have emotional intelligence. We rely on the fact that the childhood that the children are having is providing them the experiences to grow up and to be emotionally intelligent people. And emotional intelligence means to be able to identify what I feel, to have a sense of what another person feels, to put words to that experience, to communicate with another person on that level. And that has nothing to do with brain intelligence. It's a whole other aspect of what it takes to be a successfully functioning person. And being able to go over to a child and on their level, at the appropriate way, to say, you know, when that happened and I said that, I was just so frustrated that I wound up speaking that way. And I really lost my mind in that moment, speaking to you that way and giving you that consequence. I rethought that. That's obviously not going to work. Let's sit down together and talk about that. So you're not just practically readdressing the issue, but you've also taught them how to identify that you identified what that was like for you and what happened to you because you were feeling the way you were feeling and how you're addressing it now. So it's another opportunity as well.
Okay, one last question. A few more questions. So let's go to the other side of the wall.
When your child refuses to listen to you, instead of empty threats, what else would work at that moment that you don't lose it? What are tips to get you through that moment?
Okay, more specific time, when a child actually puts their foot down and says, "I'm not listening," or refuses to listen to you, no matter what, and you feel up against the wall, and you can't make any empty threats, what do you do?
I think it's happened to every parent. It depends a lot on the age of the child, okay? I don't know which age child you're speaking about. Of course, with the younger, sorry? Preteen, okay. If a preteen child refuses to do something and you want them to do it, such as homework, you have to ask yourself, is this something that's essential or something that's not? Younger children, we get into battles that are silly. Sometimes we get into a whole battle about wearing a certain outfit or wearing matching shoes, and the whole morning goes and we give consequences because the child didn't listen. But let's not look for confrontation. That's number one. Don't look for battles. We have enough problems in life. So ask yourself if this is something that I'm going to be asking for that's really necessary. Homework, 100%. Child refuses to do homework every night, then you have to really sit down with the child, not in a moment of anger. And this is what discipline is. I call it sandwich discipline. You sit down with the child, not in front of the other children. Preferably, both father and mother are together. When you have an issue, this is called an issue, right? It's not just a little thing. It's not a little tantrum. The child is refusing. And you address the child and you say, Mommy and Daddy, right now, are upset. You're a wonderful child. Think of some good things. But when it comes to this, every night we have a struggle with the homework. And this just cannot be. We have rules in this house. So you need to decide if you're going to go by the rules and there won't be a consequence. If you don't, if you refuse to do your homework every night, you just walk around the house, it's 11 o'clock and homework's not done. Sweetie, there's going to be consequences and you're not going to be happy, but it's your choice. And then you come up with a natural consequence, meaning if you refuse to do your homework, then find an activity that the child likes to do, and the child will not be able to do that, or the child will have to go to sleep earlier. Losing a privilege. Being in a family is a privilege. It's not automatic. Cell phones, that's a privilege. Do you know a parent said to me that her child, her teenager, refuses to answer the cell phone when she calls? And I said to her, well, who pays for the bill? I do. How do you pay for the bill and your child refuses to answer? Then you lose the privilege of having a phone. And you are not afraid. Don't be afraid of children. We're here to lead. So you give natural consequences, and at the same time, you show a child that your love is very, very strong. Do you know what one of the greatest consequences is for a child? And then I'll give you the mic. When I was writing my book, I said to one of my sons, who was then a teenager, what was the greatest consequence that you can remember I ever gave you? It was a chapter on discipline. Do you know what he said? Oh, Mommy, when you're disappointed in me, that's the worst. And we don't even realize disappointment is a consequence. So if a child refuses, you let the child know that you are not going to allow this to continue. And there are consequences. And you enforce the consequences.
Then there's also the situation where children are not doing well in a given situation, for example, not doing the homework at the time. And it's not as much an issue of motivation or entitlement, but perhaps it's an issue of a problem. And sometimes kids encounter problems that are not so obvious from the adult perspective. It might be something that in our mind is like simple, easy. I said shut off the TV and do homework. It's homework time. That actually involves a skill set. It involves something called executive skills and several other skills. It involves tolerating the feeling of frustration, delaying gratification, being able to turn off the TV and shift from that time into a different time called homework time requires skills. They're not the kind of skills we learn in school, but they're the kind of skills that the average kid has an average level of ability. And some kids are lagging in those skills. And so things that to parents we become frustrated about because we have expectations, and some of our other kids may have the appropriate level of skill, and therefore for them it's a no-brainer, it's not a problem, may not be so simple for some other kids. And so sometimes the issue is that the kid actually does have a problem. And so being able to sit down and explore together with the child, what's the difficulty about this? Is there a difficulty in some way? What's going on for you? And being able to try to understand from the child's perspective if there might be a problem, and then having a conversation to try to problem solve together. Just another potential scenario.
Question over here before?
The safe having office or that is part of the office for children that are already at risk. Where do you go and how does it?
Okay, so we have a plug for SAFE. The question on the floor is, does SAFE have an office for children who are already at risk? Is there a place that we can turn to? And yes, you can turn to SAFE when there is an issue in the family. There's a phone number. You can find it anywhere. It's on any of our SAFE website. It's on any of our SAFE, all the schools have it. Anytime there is a serious need in the family that does arise, feel free to contact anyone from the school. They'll be happy to direct you to the SAFE office, to the SAFE phone numbers, and there can definitely be something that can be taken care of as well.
SAFE also works very closely with many other agencies and organizations, both within the community and in general, to provide services. So even if it's not something that SAFE actually provides as a service, we'll be able to figure out and point you in the right direction.
About the importance of family dinner time, but if we have a normal routine, a nice routine, it doesn't include like it's earlier. The children are earlier, and everybody before the father gets home, because otherwise it gets much later. But that's still a healthy way. Like we have scheduled before the father comes home, but then you're never going to have family dinner time.
Question on the floor is that family dinner time is a wonderful thing, and that you spoke about the concept of family dinner time. Very often the fathers are not home in time for the children to be acting human beings by that time, so they need to go to bed. So we have is it, I guess, a fair replacement to have a ritual, so to speak, without the father, and then have a family, so to speak, time without put them to bed before the father gets home? Or how do you deal with that concept and that idea?
Right, so I'll address that first, just because I mentioned that, and there is a separate value to families having rituals and traditions. And so any routine that is about family and is about togetherness, even if it can't be with the entire family, it may not just be a parent that's at work, it may be that there's a child overseas at school or away in college or something. It's still very, very valuable and important. And then the other thing that I mentioned is that it may not be realistic in many families to have this happen on a daily basis, but if even once a week, and Shabbat is at least a perfect opportunity for that, to have one meal once a week where the entire family that's there is able to be together, and to have that be a quality time is still very, very helpful and very significant, just based on what the research shows and how that could really be a protective factor.
Okay, I think we're going to do one at a time so we can get more questions in. There's a lot of people, so unless you specifically want to address that. No, okay, terrific question. We're constantly bringing up the concept of effective consequences, of fair consequences. Aside from just sitting and talking it out with the child, is there some type of a universal, I guess, so to speak, list or universal ideas that may be considered the standard effective consequences for different age level children? So if Slav, you want to address that.
I would tell you that you need to do natural consequences. Sometimes that's most effective. You leave your bike out, you're not going to bring it in. Guess what, honey? It might get stolen, it's going to get rusty. We're not buying another one. So we need to teach our children to stop being so careless about their things, and we need to stop replacing everything the minute it gets lost. That's a natural consequence. You forgot your books in school, day after day. I'm not talking about once, but when you see that there's a problem, okay, it's becoming a habit, then natural consequences. A child doesn't get up in time and misses the bus every day. Once, twice, you drive the child good. If this becomes every single day and you're not okay with this, then the child is going to have to face the natural consequences. And then we move on. If there are things that the child appreciates and likes, it's a privilege. We don't just go out every Sunday night. We don't just buy things left and right. We don't just have cell phones and iPads and iPods and Game Boys and all these things, computer time. Everything is a privilege. And you earn your privilege. How? By being a respectful individual in this family. So you can discuss it. You can give warning. You can even say to a child, you've lost my trust right now. What do you think would be a fair consequence? Because the way you acted, this just doesn't fly here. and hear from the child. Sometimes a child will give himself or herself a consequence. You'd be surprised. And it works. But don't just ignore misbehavior.
You want to address that?
I just want to add another thought. This is, to thine own self be true. As parents, very often, we wind up getting upset and or angry with something that a child has done. And it's easy to make the mistake and unwittingly apply a consequence and determine it's effective when we feel better, or we feel like we've reestablished our sense of authority or control. And really, it's important to identify that that's two completely separate issues. There's the practical aspect of what we need to do for our kids, and then there's the emotional aspect of what we need to do to manage ourselves, and not mix the two, and that could be very difficult sometimes as well.
Okay, before we give a chance to close for the evening, I know there's a lot of questions. Slavy and Dave will be sticking around just a few minutes afterwards if anybody wants to still grab them with a couple more questions on the way out. Just one thing that came up in the SAFE office and with a lot of the SAFE teachers, with a lot of the children in the schools, a lot of them, when we teach, they often say, I wish my parents would have heard this, or can you tell this to my parents? And it's something that is a real request that's been happening again and again. So SAFE has started a new initiative online for parents to be able to kind of get little tidbits and little pointers as, you know, they're really wonderful, and when you look at them, you'll see what we mean. There's an Instagram now that we have, for those of you who are on Instagram, called Safe Parenting. And if you take a look without the spaces, take a look at Safe Parenting on Instagram. You can follow us, take a look at what we have there. Just once in a while, you'll get something, you'll say, oh, that's a great, quick 1-second thing, very condensed articles and so on and so forth. So if you can just take a look at that, if you make a note of that, that might be a way to, you know, remind yourself of what keeps happening, what we're bringing up here, and give you that fresh, new, oh yeah, right, I'm a parent, I gotta do that again every once in a while. Take a look at that. It's Safe Parenting, one word with no spaces. I just want to, again, I want to thank Slavy and David for coming tonight. I want to thank everyone else for coming as well. This is really a wonderful evening. And we look forward to doing another evening at some point in the future. And thank you so much. And again, Slavy and David are not running out the door, so grab them for a few minutes if you still want to have some more questions.